broadcast on Brexit and Britain and what a lot of people are calling the perfect storm as to what's happening here as negotiations continue for a hopefully for a trade agreement between the United Kingdom and the European Union. And it's a trade agreement that so far has been elusive. And if Britain doesn't get it, a lot of people are saying it's just going to be economic disaster. So I want to bring in Joe Phillips. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Dana.
Joe Phillips is a commentator, and we've done a number of broadcasts together. So, Joe, first of all, I mean, let's talk about where we are. Michel Barnier, talks were supposed to break up between the European Union and Britain on Sunday. Suddenly, they've now extended yet again. Barnier is sounding a little more optimistic, but they both sides say they're far away from a deal right now. But it looks like there could be a mechanism that they can agree to on trade if there is a conflict over a particular sector, and some kind of resolution to that, whether it be in the courts, the European courts. Nobody has said.
Well, I think things are a little bit more optimistic than they were a week ago. I mean, we've had mixed messages coming out of Brussels and out of London. Last week it was all over. We were heading for no deal, no question. And as you say, the talks went on with Ursula von der Leyen and Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, over the weekend. But, we are stuck with December the 31st. That is enshrined in law. So whatever happens, we are coming out. That is the end of we're out anyway, but that's the end of the transition period. Now, it is quite possible that they might be able to pull something out of the hat and carry on talking. But of course, for businesses, with just 3 weeks to go and Christmas and COVID, the perfect storm that you alluded to, it's a very, very, very uncertain time. And, the economy is not looking great, as it is around the rest of the world, is being hit very badly by coronavirus. But, here where I'm talking to you from in Kent, we've got lorry parks all ready to go, and we've seen tailbacks.
Let's talk about first this really sexy thing called the level playing field.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I'm being completely facetious, but level playing field means essentially that, okay, Britain leaves the European Union, but they want to trade with the European Union. They want independence, but they want interdependent trade. If that hasn't confused you enough, I'll keep going. But if, for instance, Britain starts deregulating industry, labor practice, environmental practice, making goods cheaper to produce here, then the EU would cry foul, and they would say, wait a minute. Or if the British government starts subsidizing certain industry, the European Union will say that's not a level playing field, and there will have to be some penalty because you are going to undersell businesses or factories in the European Union. Have I got that right?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think, there's a whole raft of stuff which refers to environmental standards, food standards, workers' rights, workers' protection. I mean, we've already seen this government in this country has relaxed the rules on the number of hours that lorry drivers can be behind the wheel in order to be able to sit in queues at Dover or on the other side of the channel. So, you can understand, and it seems to me that it's perfectly legitimate that if you're going to trade, you have to trade on an equal playing field. That you then get into, if you want to talk really sexy, you then get into the ratchet agreement, which is the bit that Britain has really, really got cross about. That Brussels basically wants to say, well, as things change, as different technologies come to light, different processes, what have you, they want the right to change what creates that, not so much the level playing field, but to make sure that you're trading on equal terms. I mean, there are two levels to this.
As you would in any country.
Exactly.
As you would in any country where there's a free trade agreement. I mean, I come from Canada, and Canada has a U.S. free trade deal with the United States. If Canada starts dumping lumber or dumping steel or doing any of those things, then the U.S. can bring in sanctions or say it's a violation of the free trade agreement. And then what they would do is they would have a mechanism between them to try and work that out. But Britain wants to leave. They want they want to sell into the European Union because that's the biggest trading bloc for them. That's the biggest buyer of their goods. But they don't want to have any mechanism if they suddenly undercut European business.
No, and I think, from a European point of view, and for certainly those of us who think the whole thing's a very bad idea, it looks as though the British government want to have their cake, eat it, and then lick the knife afterwards. And they're not prepared to budge on anything. But it does seem as though there is a little breakthrough. I mean, whether or not it comes to anything, but that may unlock, the rest of the sticking.
If it doesn't unlock, there's that picture on the screen there of trucks lined up at places like Calais, which is the French port that brings, tens of thousands of trucks into the United Kingdom, medical goods, food.
Yeah.
Incredibly, you live here and you hear them daily. But for a lot of people around the world, they don't understand how dire some of the warnings are of what will take place here if trucks suddenly cannot properly cross the border.
Well, there's a guy who's got a haulage company. He had 64 lorries, and he said he was speaking the other day and said, "I've cut my fleet to 4 because I can't afford to have 60 lorries sitting in queues." And I mean, they've been doing practices over the last couple of weeks. Seems like a really crazy idea this late in the day. And lorries are queuing for 5, 6, 7 hours, and the government has already said they would expect lorries to be queuing perhaps on either side of the channel for 48 hours. And the only exemptions on this, you may laugh, are live chicks and fish. But, what does that mean to salad crops and fruit and vegetables? We import 75% of stuff from Europe. And, of course, the other thing for the trucking companies is they don't want to come over with full loads and then go back empty. And they certainly don't want to go back and sit there.
A lot of people don't realize what's been taking place here over the last few weeks. Are big grocery stores like Sainsbury's and Tesco, and they've been stockpiling. They've been told to stockpile at least 6 weeks in advance. Food prices are already going up 5%. And by the way, Joe, I know this is a right-hand turn, but you've just reminded me. They're saying that the burrata, which I love, the burrata cheese, probably will not make the journey very well because it'll get stuck at the border and it'll spoil.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a burrata disaster. It's going to mean everything that we take for granted is going to cost a lot more. Olive oil, pasta, tomatoes, salad crops, fruit and vegetables, citrus fruit. It couldn't happen at the worst time of the year. What have we got to offer in Britain? Well, at the moment, it's Brussels sprouts, and they're rather soggy because they're underwater.
Let's move on to the next slide. I feel like I'm doing a home viewing here, and that is a UK warship,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a UK warship, and Boris Johnson's government has said that they're going to send warships into the English Channel because once there is no trade deal, then the French are going to be pushed out of British waters. The majority of fishing boats in there are European fishing boats, and just not French, but Dutch and different countries come in there. Most of the fish that is taken here by British fishermen is sold into the European Union anyway. Fish accounts for 0.4% of the economy.
Yeah, it's a tiny part of GDP, but it is very totemic, as it is around Europe actually, and all fishing countries, but it's particularly so in England because we are an island nation. But the idea that we would put our warships around our coastal waters to threaten or deter NATO partners is frankly embarrassing. It is ridiculous and has been widely condemned by, military and service experts and the chairman of
the Defense Secretary of Britain came out today and said that it needed to be done.
The Defence Secretary, yes, indeed, but the chairman of the much more influential Commons Defence Committee, a former military man himself, said it was embarrassing. I mean, people from the old days, the good old days of a different sort of conservative party, which wasn't nationalistic, based on personality and based on this particularly ridiculous right-wing agenda of nationalism and isolationism, have come out and roundly condemned it. It is utterly ridiculous. You know, we, as you say, export most of the fish that we catch in these waters to Europe. And there's always been an argument with British fishermen who feel as though they've been unfairly penalised because there have been limits on stocks and they're supposed to throw back undersized fish. And they say, oh, you go to any fish market in France or Spain, look at the sprats, the small fish that are on for sale there. So, you know, that's not going to go away.
Anyway, it's one of those political discussions, because when the government starts explaining level playing field and trade sanctions to the public, their eyes glaze over. But when we talk about fish in territorial waters, somehow Boris Johnson's government thinks that that's more appealing and more sellable to people here. If you're just joining us, my name's Dana Lewis of the podcast Backstory with Dana Lewis, and Joe Phillips is our commentator, and we're just wrapping up here a discussion on Brexit and the perfect storm. And right now, as we speak, the European Union is sitting with the United Kingdom, and they are very close to either having a deal, a trade deal, or very close to having talks completely collapse and Britain emerge in January with no trade deal with its biggest trading partner, which is Europe. So, Joe, how does this end?
I don't think it's going to be a happy ending, but I think it could be slightly less bad if we end up with some deal. Some deal gives you a sliver of hope. No deal gives you no hope. We will be, you know, we are already a diminished country, a diminished nation. I think our standing around the world has gone completely downhill, not least because of the threats and the willingness that was exposed of Boris Johnson's government to break international law. I mean, they have removed that from the treaty. But don't forget, Dana, that even if we get some sort of deal, it has still got to be ratified by the European Parliament. It's got to be, you know, logistically, it's got to be translated into 24 different languages. And all of that has got to be done before the 31st of December. So, you know, we're on a very, very tight deadline here. I would like to think we come out with a deal, because a deal has got to be better than no deal. I don't have the faith in the Prime Minister that he will not just walk away and leave us dangling over a cliff edge.
Does it, at the end of this, and my last question to you, is it not ironic in so many different ways that Britain was sold Brexit, leaving the European Union, to have its sovereignty, to be independent, which a lot of people say they had their sovereignty and they were independent anyway. But that's how it was sold to the British people who supported the referendum. And now nobody understands quite why Boris Johnson's government is having so much trouble negotiating a deal that is all about interdependence, because that's what you have to do with your trading partner.
Well, exactly. But, you know, Boris Johnson was saying, you know, he's been in power, been in number 10 for exactly a year. He won with a huge majority. And he has been talking for years about having this oven-ready deal. Well, now it appears he hasn't even got an oven, never mind anything to put in it. And the number of people who say, oh, if I'd known it was going to be like this, I wouldn't have voted leave. Yeah. I mean, the challenge, I think, and I know we're coming to the end of this, but the challenge for us, whatever happens, is how you begin to rebuild a country that is not based on, well, you voted for this, this is your fault. We have to somehow or other together work our way out of it. And it may be that, you know, if we can leave the door open a little bit, there will be a room for another government in years to come to make a better relationship with Europe. But at the moment, as you say, it is utterly ridiculous. We've been banging on about sovereignty and independence, and here we are now trying to create something that is so determined on interdependence of our European partners.
Joe Phillips, great to talk to you again. And yeah, here we are. And at the worst possible time, when the economy is already on its knees with COVID-19, and they are rapidly approaching January, where if they get a trade deal, it will be interesting if they can actually, as you said, get it through Parliament, get it through the European Union, which I think they probably will in the end, if they can sign off on a deal and have the support of France and Germany and the majors. But at the same time, they're very close to teetering on the edge of not having a deal as well. So, Joe, good to talk to you.
And you, and I dare say we will return to this subject one way or the other before very long.
We will. Thank you so much. Joe Phillips, the commentator here in the United Kingdom. My name's Dana Lewis, and I'm the host of the podcast Backstory with Dana Lewis. Check it out. It's on all the platforms from Apple to Stitcher to TuneIn to you name it. So have a listen to some of our broadcasts, and we'll keep you up to date as Brexit unfolds, hopefully not in a car crash, but we'll be watching. Thanks, Joe.